17th century made by young upper-class Britons. And as I strode through the museum and reflected on my own life journey, I thought about how late travel became a part of my story. The Europeans I made friends with as a study abroad student in Spain used to laugh about how I was the most American they had ever met. To wit, I was born in a small rural town. I'd worked as a paperboy and a lifeguard. I played baseball and collected baseball cards. I said the Pledge of Allegiance every day all through my public education. I was an altar boy at a Protestant church, and my high school sweetheart was a cheerleader. So before I left Allegheny High School in Cumberland, Maryland, for Towson University in Towson, Maryland, a massive 2.5 hours east, I had hardly been anywhere ever. I went to Cleveland, Ohio once to see the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with my friend Ed. There were family trips to the Jersey Shore before it was the Jersey Shore on television, with the only purpose of seeing extended family. So returning to my thematic path through the museum, the accompanying literature reminded the participant that, quote, indeed until relatively recently, journeys were not undertaken for pleasure. The roads were infested with bandits and wild animals, the seas with pirates. Nature was an essentially hostile environment. Instead, journeys were taken for religious reasons, such as pilgrimages, or for purposes of conquest or for commercial gain. So why had travel not been a part of my life until age 20, when I picked up and moved to Spain? So this is my family, circa 1984, about to make our first and last real family trip to Disney's Epcot Center in Florida. I'm the baby in my father's arms, shying away from the camera or the sun. And if you look beyond the haircuts and the fashion choices to the defining elements of this image, you can see the glowing optimism in the smiling faces. The driver's side door of our Malibu station wagon swung open, ready to whisk us all away to adventures untold. The 4 children bookended by my still very young parents, looking upon their brood with a mixture of tenderness and unbridled hope that this trip is just what this family needs. Recall, however, that I mentioned this would also be the last trip this family would take together, aside from requisite trips to Jersey for weddings and funerals. That's because when the trip started, with the Sears S-Cargo car-top carrier on the top of our station wagon, opening up on the highway 5 minutes from our front door. We kids watched through the back window through the bike spokes as our suitcases opened in midair over the freeway, like giant butterflies giving birth to an assortment of 80s-era clothing. Mom and Dad would fight the entire time, my mom screaming, "Turn right, Jackson," and my father angrily replying, "Damn it, Karen, you know I don't know my right from my left." True story. We kids played our part by being utterly horrible to one another. It rained the whole time. It in fact played out like an updated version of the museum's description of early travel. The roads were infested with confusing signage, the car with screaming children pirates, nature an essentially hostile environment. And that was one of the main reasons I'd never been anywhere in my life before the age of 20. Travel in my family was seen as something that would unnecessarily thrust us towards the apocalypse and was to be avoided at all costs. And my parents were right about one thing. Travel involves risk, putting yourself out there, exposing yourself to dangers unknown. So returning to my museum route, the accompanying literature also reminded, quote, not only goods were exchanged, but also ideas, artistic knowledge, languages, and religions. For alongside the merchants and the soldiers traveled scholars and monks. So here I am, headed off to Spain for my junior year abroad, about to embark upon the most transformative year of my life, poised to experience innumerable cultural and linguistic failures and immeasurable personal growth. And it's still hard for me to fully understand what pushed naive, unsophisticated 20-year-old me to move abroad for a year when I'd rarely been out of the state and never set foot outside of the country before. All I can really say that there was something inside me that knew this trip had to happen, something welling up within that required an expanding of horizons in my life. So why should we travel? Everyone's always saying, you need to see the world. Travel is how you find yourself. And as I came to the end of my travel-themed museum itinerary, I asked myself out loud, I think, did I ever really find myself? What had travel done for me in my life? And in my admittedly extreme case, in a broad sense, it has given me the most important things I have, my work and my family. I teach the language and culture I learned abroad, and I married a woman I met while abroad. But specifically, how did I get here, and what role did travel play? To begin with, Travel gave me a sense of direction, both literally and metaphorically. Before I left for Spain, my mother used to say, "You couldn't find your way out of a wet paper bag," which if you think about it is pretty easy to do. I got lost every day for like 2 months when I first lived abroad in Murcia, Spain. But when you get lost, you need to be resourceful to find a way back. And you're likely to stumble upon something the guidebooks may have missed. And on the more metaphorical side, Thoreau said it best, quote, "Not until we are lost do we begin to understand ourselves." It also gave me opportunities to fail and to learn how to fail. In the beginning, with my feeble Spanish, I got everything wrong every time. If a word was supposed to be masculine, I made it feminine. If I was supposed to use the preterite, I went with the imperfect. If it was the indicative, I used the subjunctive, so on. But every bit of feedback on a mispronounced word or a confused idiom brought me closer to mastering this new language I had become fascinated with. And failing so much and so often also did me the favor of chilling me out. A great professor of mine at Towson told me before I left, quote, "Do yourself a favor and step down off the cross while you're over there." He was referring to my tendencies towards perfectionism and obsession with finishing college with a 4.0 GPA. And I can assure you, I did not finish college with that 4.0 GPA, thanks to a string of merely normal grades while I was studying abroad in Spain. Instead, I came away from college with a somewhat better sense of who I was, or at least which direction I wanted to go to be the kind of person I wanted to be. And lastly, travel taught me to question things about where I'm from and to challenge my beliefs. Maybe healthcare should be something you don't have to pay tons of money for. Maybe higher education should be affordable for everyone. Maybe all Russians aren't bad guys who speak English with British accents. Maybe a midday siesta is a really good idea. These are all things that studying abroad made me think about for the first time. So in closing, I have to say I'm not a big fan of the reflection you sometimes hear. Travel makes me appreciate what I've got here in America. If you do get abroad, try to avoid the mindset of we do it right in America. Ask yourself why people do the things the way they do. Ask people you meet questions. And most importantly, listen to what folks have to say when you ask those questions. Thank you very much. That's it.
I get to go. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks to Senor Zealand for that. That was really great storytelling and an important message. Global travel and all the ideas that Senor Zealand shared are really at the heart of Gilman's foundational language. I'll share a little bit from our school's diversity statement. Gilman School's commitment to diversity is founded on the belief that our community is strengthened by the vibrant exchange that occurs when individuals with different backgrounds, abilities, and heritages share their various perspectives with one another. And this commitment includes the exchange of ideas with people from parts all over the world. And that's why Gilman supports a range of global travel opportunities for faculty and students. And you heard from Senor Zealand, right, about the opportunity that Gilman was able to afford him this past summer. And I wanted to share with you some of the opportunities in the coming year that are available to all of you. And some of them you've heard about, some of them you might not be yet familiar with. But so you heard from Mr. Kelly and Mr. Hudson about the World War II Europe trip that's coming up in June. If you still have interest in that and you have not engaged Mr. Kelly or Mr. Hudson, please do that as soon as you can. In a few moments, you're going to be hearing about an opportunity in Peru, a leadership and service program that is run in partnership with the World Leadership School, and that takes place in July. And importantly, there is an info session for you and for your families tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. in the lecture hall. There's a trip going to Spain this summer in June led by Ms. Hurley and Ms. Trapp, and they have an info session on November 18th, and you're going to hear from them. I spoke to the juniors last week about the exchange programs that are available. Those are programs that take place both in the UK and the Czech Republic. And the applications for those programs are due November 3rd. Come talk to me if you'd like to discuss that in greater detail. And then finally, Last week you met Max Martin, who's here from Cape Town, South Africa, and Bishop's College. We have just started an exchange program with them, and so current freshmen, if you are interested in participating in that exchange program in your sophomore year, you can talk to me. That process won't kick in until May. Okay? So that's kind of a general overview of why we support these programs and some of the specific ones that are available to you. Okay, so I think I'm going to hand it over right now to Senor Duncan, who's going to tell you a little bit more with some help from some of the students about the trip that he and they took to Peru last summer.
Good morning. Leadership, service, and personal growth. One of the things that we try to endorse a lot here at Gilman is your opportunity to do that. So with World Leadership, we have an opportunity for you to go to Peru. It's a 2-week program that can really do something for you in many ways. This is a great opportunity that the school offers. This was our trip. We started, as you can see, 9 students, 2 chaperones. We're bookending this group. While we were there, we worked in a school community, and when we started this project, I thought to myself, no way. We are not going to be able to dig the trenches and put up the posts to project light so that the students in this community can play after dark. And if you're thinking about Peru, you might think, well, here in Baltimore in the summertime, it probably gets dark around 8:30 to 9. In Peru, it's dark at 6 o'clock. And so you have a lot of kids that really don't have a lot to do and nowhere to have fun. And so by the time we finished that project in a week, those 9 students put in enough work so that the lights went on and the kids played soccer that evening. While we were there, we also visited a reserve. And in the reserve, what they do, there are a lot of animals that are taken as pets. And actually, this toucan is something that can go for about $5,000 in Europe. These are animals that should be protected. And this reserve in particular was dedicated to that notion. And here, the students prepared the food for the toucan. While we were there, we were also able to travel along the basin of the Amazon, and we saw some capybaras and the scarlet macaws. But of course, just as in Mr. Zeeland's slide, we got a chance to see Machu Picchu. And like Mr. Zeeland said, when I was in high school, I saw this in a book, in my Spanish book. And I thought, geez, that's great. I'll never get there. Last summer, I was able to go with a group of students who had the opportunity to unplug. That's the other thing, too. When you are abroad, you should always try to unplug and get into the culture. By the time we had gotten towards the end of our trip, the students had kept that promise of not plugging in. They weren't surfing, they weren't using their phones to find out what was going on in America, or the US rather. They were really getting into our trip by leadership and example. And so here, one of the guides was giving us information on Machu Picchu. Here, our group took our shot. As you can see, all of us healthy, fine, smiling. Not so much. There is a thing that can happen to you when you travel. Sometimes you're not feeling all that great, but as you can see, everybody still had a positive outlook, and we were enjoying a great experience. This is us just before we left. We were in Ollantaytambo, which is the little town we stayed in just before we made our trek to Machu Picchu. One of the things that I can say about the World Leadership School is that the guide Johan, was incredible in helping us experience what is Peru. He himself is a Peruvian, and so he led us on all of our trips. And we remember, I think the word for us was day pack. Everything is, do you have your day pack? Okay? And our experience there was a wonderful one, and I'll ask 4 of those participants to just share a little bit about what they did.
Yeah, so this summer when I originally came to Gilman on that Saturday, I believe, I hadn't really met any of the guys or Holly that went on the trip. So this is one of the experiences that like you really get to immerse yourself with the group. You get to learn more about the guys that you're staying with. I mean, you spend 2 weeks with them in the middle of the jungle, so you're gonna get to know them. And I think one of the most memorable experiences for me was on one of the last days in the community, we spent time running around the community looking for different like places and stations where we were kind of doing a scavenger hunt. And of the stations, we had archery, there was some like rice folding stuff for cooking, and there was also some dancing that they had for us. So it was one of those times where like you really could just look back at the community and really understand like how they functioned and put yourself in their world. And it's one of the best times for you to actually self-reflect and to learn more about your place in your life. So.
So like Matthew said, I didn't really know a lot of the guys that went on the trip beforehand. And I think my most memorable experience was just like, you know, besides working in the school, helping out with the kids and, you know, making friends with the new people at the school, I think my favorite time was just like all the late nights we had and staying up, like, you know, just playing card games and bonding. I think that was really great because now I'm pretty close with most of the guys that went on the trip. So that was pretty good. And playing soccer with the kids at school was also pretty good too. And they were also really good at ping pong, so that was pretty cool too. So yeah, and the food was really good too. Yeah.
So when I first heard about the trip, my initial reaction was like 2 weeks, middle of summer, without my close friends or my phone, in a foreign country with spiders that are as big as my fist. Absolutely not. But then like my parents convinced me to look into it, so I was like, all right, I'll go to the meeting and learn a little bit about it. And like as I learned more about it, I was like, all right, why not try something new for once? So I went on the trip, and I actually had the best time of my life. I did get a little sick, unfortunately, which put a damper on my experience, but overall it was the best 2 weeks of my summer, and I highly encourage any of you who are like on the fence just to look into it, and who knows, maybe you'll have a life-changing experience as I did.
So my favorite experience from the trip was after working really hard to try to help this school, when we got to take breaks to play with the kids, like Arsen mentioned, soccer, they're really into that. And then Frank and I were really inspired by this trip, and so we wanted to try to help this school. So we're planning a fundraiser, so just look out for that in the future, guys. Thank you.
Buenos dias, chicos y profesores. Ms. Hurley and I are here today to talk about a program that we're offering this summer for a travel, homestay, and academic experience in Spain. This is a long-standing program in which Ms. Hurley participated way back when she first started teaching in Connecticut at a private school called Choate Rosemary. And then when she moved to Baltimore, she brought the program to St. Paul's and Garrison Forest. Now that we are lucky enough to have her here at Gilman, we're offering this program at Gilman. Ms. Hurley.
Muchas gracias, señora Trapp. Buenos días, otra vez, chicos. So as Ms. Trapp mentioned, we're going to be launching this program here. It's called a Travel, Homestay, Study Abroad program. The opportunity in Spain for this upcoming summer As you can see, the dates are June 12th to June 28th, which means we're back soon enough that if there are other activities that you tend to be involved in the summertime, you still have a big chunk of summer left. So, yeah. Where's my second slide? Yes, Madrid. So we take an overnight flight from Philadelphia to Madrid, Madrid, of course, being the capital city of Spain. We spend 3 nights in a hotel in Madrid. It's right in the center of town, so it's walkable to everything that we could possibly want to see, the important places like the Royal Palace, the Prado Museum. We walk to the Retiro Park. We spend some time in the Plaza Mayor. And then, since we're there for 3 days, we have one day that we take an excursion outside of the city, and we go to Toledo. Toledo is also a very important town. It's known for their quaint, narrow cobblestone streets, and more importantly, it's considered the religious capital of Spain, whereby Madrid is the political capital, Barcelona is the financial capital, this is the religious capital, and they still have, of course, since it's a Catholic country now, the Christian cathedral, but Muslims, Jews, and Arabs lived for about 400 years in perfect peace and harmony in this town, so it's well known for that. And then we get back to Madrid, and then we take off for our bus ride up to Gijón, and we take a stop in the important town first of Segovia, which is known for this castle El Alcázar, and also the Roman aqueduct that would have been built by the Romans, yes, over 2,000 years ago. Good job. Over 2,000 years ago, there's no mortar. They just were geniuses and knew how to put this together, and it's a pretty amazing sight. So then we leave Segovia and travel the rest of the way up to Gijón. Gijón is where the academic homestay portion of the program takes place, and the students will spend the next 10 days there. As you can see, Gijón is a beach town. It's on the northern coast of Spain. Anybody who's had me in class knows that I don't care much for the heat, and so we go to the north where it's lovely out almost every day. Gijón is a well-kept secret. It's a real treasure, and it's not overrun by tourists or by speakers of English, which makes it ideal for an immersion program. So the students will live with families and attend classes for 2 hours a day. I talked about this in some of my classes, and they were like, classes, but they really are designed. They take place at this language academy called Mundo Idiomas. They're taught by native speakers who are year-round employees at the school, and the students learn about Spanish culture, but with an emphasis on topics that would be relative to young people, relative to the place where they're living. It's good to know a little bit about where they are, which is the region of Asturias, which is where Gijón is located. And there's also great emphasis on conversation because we're trying to increase and improve fluency in Spanish. The homestay part of the trip is designed for students to be truly, truly immersed in Spanish life, and they actually become a part of the family. All the meals are taken at home with the family, so they have breakfast in the morning, they go back for lunch, and they go back for dinner. And this is an excellent, excellent opportunity for conversation. I remember with my own first family that I lived with, that was when we just laughed and made mistakes and, just had a great time talking with the family, and we learned so much in the process. The family in this photo, that's one of my former students from Garrison. She's lived with this family. This family's worked with us since the 1990s when I started out with St. Paul's. And they're good friends of mine today, and they say that they repeat the experience over and over because Juanita, which they call me in Spain, always brings model students, and they just love hosting. So after class time, there's always time to explore the city. You'll go on some walking excursions with the teachers. We'll arrange and take you around, show you your way, and then encourage you to go back on your own sometime. Sometimes you do have some free time. And since we drive everywhere here in the States, it's hard to imagine. Everything is just completely walkable. Anything you would need to do or want to do is completely walkable. And it's a great way to mix in with the Gijoneses, or the local people from Gijón. And there's also time. So up here we have one of those old-time cafes, which is one of my favorite things to do. Go and write postcards or in a journal, have a little tortilla de patatas, a little café con leche. And the bottom right picture is my very, very favorite spot right outside of Gijón. And it's someplace where you can walk and do a little hiking. And there's also time, in the afternoons for the beach, weather permitting. And it's typical to see people playing soccer. They have games of volleyball going on the beach, paddleball. You see surfers from the surf schools around Gijón, and it's filled with Spaniards all the time. We are there for just one full weekend, so we'd take a full Saturday excursion to 3 different places. The one to the far left is called Oviedo, and that's the capital city of the region of Asturias. It's a university town, so it's kind of neat, and they've got street performers usually when we get there, great cafes, a market. And then we leave there and go to the second town called Cudillero, which is a typical pueblo pesquero, which is a fisherman's town, and that's just kind of neat because it's so different. And then we end the day with a relaxing afternoon in this beach town called Salinas, where your families prepare you bocadillos or sandwiches. You have your lunch there, and we hang out until we're ready to go. And then finally, we return for one last night in Madrid, and there's the Plaza Mayor, the outdoor cafes. So we have one last evening there to go out and have dinner. Shops are open until 1 in the morning. Believe it or not, it's crazy in Spain. The hours between 10 and 12 just disappear. It's like, how do they do this? So they have the late sort of nightlife. Anyway, last night there in Madrid to go shopping, pick up your last souvenirs, your last night with your friends there, recounting your experience. And then we return to Philadelphia, direct flight, come back to Gilman, and you are picked up in the evening by your parents, your American parents, you'll still remember them, and taken home. And in closing, I would like to say, why Gijón del Alma? Gijón del Alma is an expression that means Gijón of my soul. It's a hymn that was written as a tribute to this magical and enchanting town. Most people feel that this is a magical and enchanting town. There's just something about Gijón that reaches in and captures your heart and your soul, and it never leaves you. The town is awesome, and it has so much to offer. The people are fantastic, and they're really down to earth. It's all kept me going back to this same town for more than 30 years with groups of students, and it never gets old. So again, hasta luego, Gijón del Alma, or as a close friend of mine says, hasta siempre. Thank you.
So we'll do announcements, then we got one more quick thing. All right, we'll start with faculty. Faculty announcements. Mr. Cable.
The bell choir will be effective in the 5th period. Only the Glee Club members are going to Roland Park.
Any other faculty announcements? Student announcements? Matt?
Swim team interest meeting Monday, November 6th at 4 o'clock. Pool. Practice starts Tuesday, November 7th. So either.
Cole?
Yeah, focus Bible study in the Gilman room tomorrow, immediately following 2nd period. Pray for it.
Max?
Varsity Club guys are going to be meeting in the lecture hall. And if you signed up for Varsity Club during the club fair, we haven't forgotten about you guys. We're just a little bit stressed out. We'll get to it.
Jeff?
Is Brian Wong here?
Here.
Hey Brian, can you spell the word in Latin, I conquer? U-E-K-B-E. And did you conquer over the weekend? I did. Tell me you did, Brian. No. Listed a Latin spelling bee over the weekend and I won.
Awesome. Yeah, Brian. Oh, excuse me. Right up.
Last week, me and Lisa J at CTO5, that's the classroom, the next to Dr. Lowe's office.
Yep.
Tickets for the Bremer Musical Picnic are now on sale. It's next weekend, October 27th, 28th, and 29th, so look for the link.
Any other student announcements? So guys, remember? Oh yeah, wait. Yeah, right. So storm the pool today, 5 o'clock, right? I hope you brought your Hawaiian themed stuff. No big Smith that want those staying in the bottom. But yeah, 5 o'clock, it's senior day. If you have practice, come out afterwards. That should be a really fun event. Yes, oh, that's right. Bring your own towel. Right, the cage will not be supplying towels for you. Oh, wristbands. We sold about a quarter of them yesterday. Remember, if we get them all sold by Thursday, Mr. Hubeck, is that right? We have a dress down on Friday, correct? I suppose. All right. So that means if we get them all sold, they're $3 each. Remember, they're in the annex. See about those. We got a quarter of them sold. Let's get all the rest of them. That's hurricane relief. Is there anything else? Anybody have anything? Oh, Booker. At the end of assembly, if we have any time, we're going to vote for Booker. He's ahead by 1% in the voting. That ends today at like midday, right? So we'll get that going. But we're going to turn it over for one last thing.
Hello, my name is Quinn Craig, and this is Grant Emery, and we're excited to say that we are starting a Best Buddies Friendship chapter here at Gilman. Grant has a little more information about what Best Buddies is and what our goal here is.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Best Buddies is a international nonprofit with celebrity sponsors such as Guy Fieri and Kyrie Irving. They focus on forming one-to-one friendships between people with mental disabilities and people that don't have mental disabilities. So how the friendship chapter at Gilman is going to work is, well, it's going to start with the leaders of the club going to a national leadership conference, and then a local training day, and then leading monthly or bi-monthly meetings with a local high school that has a special ed program, doing activities like playing kickball or tie-dyeing t-shirts. I also want to help the club get out and do local fundraisers like the Maryland Buddy Walk and the Polar Bear Plunge, if you guys have heard of that. So we're going to have some Gilman teams for that coming. We're still a little bit away, have some stuff to square away with the local Best Buddies representative before we can actually officially start this. So we don't have an interest meeting time or date yet, but we'll definitely make an announcement in assembly when we have all that ready. And I'd encourage all you guys to come out and check this out. It's a really rewarding experience, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. All right, so before we go ahead and take out your phones. Booker sent the email this morning. Go on there, hit the link, and let's get it going.
So anyway,
I'm not.